Hello, I want to welcome you to the Sioux Falls Housing and Redevelopment Commission's Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Today, you will receive your voucher and a briefing packet. This packet contains information which will assist you in locating housing that meets the standards of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, commonly called HUD. The rest of this video presentation will explain the Section 8 voucher program and the information in your briefing packet. Please listen carefully. You will be able to benefit from the voucher subsidy and be a successful participant of the program when you locate a suitable dwelling unit and fulfill your responsibilities as a participant. The voucher subsidy enables you to live in a privately owned dwelling unit with neighbors who may own their own home or rent like you. As a member of the community, you will be expected to abide by whatever laws, regulations, and rules are in place. Sioux Falls Housing has zero tolerance for participants who cannot live by the terms of their lease or cause complaints from their neighbors. Your conduct, the conduct of every member of your household, and your guests will determine if you can remain in the Section 8 voucher program and continue to receive rental assistance. Sioux Falls Housing staff strive to make your participation in the Section 8 voucher program successful. Participating in the voucher program is not a right. Keeping the voucher subsidy is your responsibility. Providing complete, accurate, and timely information and cooperating with Sioux Falls Housing on inspections, recertifications, and returning signed documents will ensure your continued participation in the program. Sioux Falls Housing provides rental assistance to over 2,000 families and takes seriously its responsibility of administering this program in accordance with HUD regulations and the administrative policies established by Sioux Falls Housing's Board of Commissioners. We understand this is a very complex program. You will be receiving a lot of information today. If you have any questions regarding your responsibilities or obligations, please do not hesitate to ask questions after this video presentation or to contact your assigned Sioux Falls Housing caseworker. Now, please open the briefing packet that you received today and pay close attention to the following video presentation.
You all have gone through the formal application process, and Sioux Falls Housing and Redevelopment Commission has determined that you met United States Department of Housing and Urban Development's eligibility criteria for participation in the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Sioux Falls Housing does not discriminate in admission to, access to, or treatment in its federally funded programs and activities. If you have questions or concerns regarding possible illegal discrimination, you may contact Diane Hovestad here at Sioux Falls Housing. The voucher program allows you to select a unit that you want to rent in the private market. Sioux Falls Housing will pay a portion of the rent directly to the landlord and you will pay the difference. The unit you select has to meet certain criteria. It must be located within the city limits of Sioux Falls or Minnehaha County. It can be a house, apartment, duplex, mobile home. It must be inspected to determine if it meets HUD's housing quality standards. The landlord must agree to participate in the program. The landlord and tenant must enter into a lease agreement, and there is a limit on the amount of rent you can pay. Funding for the voucher program is allocated by the United States Congress during the annual appropriations process. HUD allocates the money to provide rental assistance to Sioux Falls Housing. Sioux Falls Housing is responsible to administer the voucher program. Sioux Falls Housing has a contractual relationship with the household receiving rental assistance through the voucher. It is up to Sioux Falls Housing to determine if you qualify for the program and if you continue to qualify for the program, not the landlords. The landlord and the tenant have a contractual relationship through the lease. As you see, Sioux Falls Housing and Redevelopment Commission is not a party to the lease agreement. You are not a tenant of Sioux Falls Housing. The landlord and the Sioux Falls Housing have a contractual relationship through the Housing Assistance Payment Contract. It is Sioux Falls Housing's responsibility to make sure the landlord is abiding by the terms of the HAP contract. If they aren't, then Sioux Falls Housing can terminate the HAP contract, and if you're eligible, you can transfer your assistance to another unit. The purpose of this briefing is to explain how the voucher programs work and to inform you of the rules, regulations, policies, and obligations of the program. You will receive your voucher today. The voucher shows that Sioux Falls Housing has funding available to assist you with your rent and that you met the eligibility criteria for receiving rental assistance. If a landlord wants verification that you are eligible for the program, you show him a copy of the voucher. As with many federally funded programs, there are many complex rules and regulations that must be followed. This program is difficult to administer, and we recognize that it can be difficult for people to participate in. If you have any questions, please write them down and we'll answer them after this presentation. Before we get started with the details of the program, I want to review the importance of providing complete and accurate information to Sioux Falls Housing, as the amount of rental assistance Sioux Falls Housing pays on your behalf is based on your household composition and income. HUD places a high priority on preventing fraud. If your application or recertification forms contain false or incomplete information, you may be terminated from the rental assistance program, required to repay all overpaid rental assistance you received from the Sioux Falls Housing, fined up to $10,000, imprisoned for up to 5 years, and/or prohibited from receiving future assistance. Sioux Falls Housing places a heavy emphasis on eliminating program abuse and fraud. In order to help combat program fraud and abuse, Sioux Falls Housing matches information you provide to Sioux Falls Housing with information employers provide to the South Dakota Department of Labor. Sioux Falls Housing also receives reports from the Social Security Administration, who is receiving Social Security or SSI. Sioux Falls Housing is required to provide information to other governmental agencies. Sioux Falls Housing now receives a report showing the differences between income reported to Sioux Falls Housing and the IRS. Sioux Falls Housing receives a printout showing each household member's employer and the amount of money they earn. This information comes from the new hires database and the IRS. Sioux Falls Housing is required to investigate any discrepancies between what is reported to the new hires database and the IRS. If Sioux Falls Housing determines that you did not report all income, you could be required to repay Sioux Falls Housing rental assistance paid on your behalf or prosecuted for fraud. It is your obligation to accurately report all income, people living with you, and any changes. The first document in your packet that we will review is the voucher. It is the second document from the front on the left side of the packet. There are two important boxes to remember on this voucher. Box 1, unit size. This indicates the number of bedrooms that your household qualifies for based on your family composition. We use this number of bedrooms in calculating your rental assistance. 3 is very important. This is the date your voucher expires. You must have located a unit and submitted the necessary paperwork to Sioux Falls Housing by this date. If you do not, your case will be closed. If you want rental assistance in the future, you would have to reapply to Sioux Falls Housing's waiting list and wait until your name reaches the top and funding is available. You may request an extension of the expiration date if you have difficulty locating a unit or if there are other extenuating circumstances. This request must be made to Sioux Falls Housing before the expiration date of your voucher. Once a household starts receiving rental assistance, they have responsibilities it must meet in order to continue to receive rental assistance. These responsibilities are called family obligations. If a household does not fulfill their family obligations, the rental assistance may be terminated. Family obligations include 1. Supply information, documentation, and sign releases that HUD or Sioux Falls Housing request. 2. Do not cause a breach in HQS. Household make sure the utilities they are responsible for paying aren't shut off. If a utility is shut off, your rental assistance will be terminated. Stove and refrigerator provided by the household must be in working order. All burners and oven must work, and the freezer and refrigerator compartment must work. If one or more of these items don't work, the unit does not pass housing quality standards. 3. The household must allow Sioux Falls Housing to inspect the unit. Sioux Falls Housing must inspect the unit before rental assistance can begin. We must also inspect a unit that's under the program at least annually. If we can't inspect the unit because no one is home when the inspector goes out to the unit, the rental assistance will be terminated. 4. The household must abide by the terms of the lease agreement. If a landlord evicts a tenant for violating the terms of the lease agreement, the household can lose their rental assistance. 5. The household must give Sioux Falls Housing a copy of their notice to move at the same time it gives one to their landlord. If the household does not give Sioux Falls Housing a copy of this notice, it could lose their rental assistance. Some landlords require 60 days advance written notice, some 31, or others 30. You need to look at your lease agreement. 6. The household must give Sioux Falls Housing a copy of any eviction notice they receive from their landlord. Number 7. The household must use the assisted unit as their only place of residence. This means that you cannot receive rental assistance in Sioux Falls and have a place you own or rent elsewhere. Number 8. All household members must be approved by Sioux Falls Housing before he or she moves into the unit. They have to provide Sioux Falls Housing the same information and sign the same forms you did when Sioux Falls Housing determined your eligibility for the program. This includes foster children and live-in aides. Number 9. The household must notify Sioux Falls Housing if a household member moves out. Number 10. Household members may engage in profit-making activities if they do not interfere with the primary use of the residence. Number 11. The household cannot sublet or sublease the unit. You cannot rent out a room or a basement. Number 12. The household cannot move out of the assisted unit or let another household move in and transfer the lease agreement. Number 13. The household cannot own the unit or be buying it and receiving rental assistance. Number 14. The household cannot be absent from the unit for more than 30 days. If you're hospitalized or called out of town or in jail for an extended period of time, you need to let Sioux Falls Housing know. Number 15. Household members may not commit fraud, bribery, or criminal acts in connection with housing programs. 16. Household members may not engage in drug-related or violent criminal activity. According to a recent South Dakota Supreme Court ruling, a program participant can lose their rental assistance if there is a preponderance of evidence that a household member is engaging in drug-related activity. There does not need to be an arrest or a conviction. 17. The household cannot receive rental assistance under the voucher program and receive another type of rental assistance. 18. The household cannot receive rental assistance in a unit owned by a parent, child, grandparent, sister, or a brother. This can be waived as a reasonable accommodation to a qualified individual with disabilities. Subsidy standard are the amount used to calculate the amount of rental assistance Sioux Falls Housing will pay on a household's behalf each month. Subsidy standards are based on the number of persons in the household, the relationship to the voucher holder, and the sex of the household members. Subsidy standards will be based on the smallest size appropriate to the voucher holder needs. You will find the subsidy standard your household qualifies for in Block 1 on the front page of the voucher. The numbers in the left column refer to the bedroom size of the unit. 0 bedroom would be an efficiency apartment or house. The other numbers in the column are self-explanatory. The numbers in the middle column refer to the minimum number of persons in the household Sioux Falls Housing uses to determine the appropriate subsidy standard. The numbers in the right column refer to the maximum number of persons in the household Sioux Falls Housing uses to determine the appropriate subsidy. Sioux Falls Housing will use the following factors in determining the subsidy standard for a household. Minor children of same sex must share a bedroom. Every family member, regardless of age, will be counted as a person for occupancy purposes, unborn children included. A full-time student attends school out of town but returns home 3 consecutive months per year will be counted in determining the appropriate subsidy standard for the household. Parents must have physical custody at least 51% of the year or 183 days per year in order to be counted as part of the household. A child may not be counted in 2 separate households in any rental assistance program. On a case-by-case basis, Sioux Falls Housing will consider granting exceptions to these subsidy standards under the following circumstance. If due to medical reasons, household members who normally share a bedroom, like husband and wife, need separate bedrooms. If an elderly or disabled household member need a live-in aid or need additional space for rehabilitation equipment, Sioux Falls Housing would have to verify the need for the larger unit. If you have any questions regarding this, you should discuss them with your Sioux Falls Housing caseworker. A voucher holder has 60 days from today's date to locate a unit that meets their needs and meets HUD's criteria and submit the necessary paperwork to Sioux Falls Housing. On a case-by-case basis, Sioux Falls Housing will consider granting an extension beyond the initial 60-day period. To request an extension, the voucher holder must contact Sioux Falls Housing prior to the expiration date in Box 3 on the front side of the voucher. Sioux Falls Housing may grant 1 or more extensions for an additional 60 days. Usually, Sioux Falls Housing will not grant extensions that exceed 120 days from the initial term of the voucher. Voucher holders should keep track of the units they have looked at during their housing search in case they need to request an extension. Extensions are at the discretion of Sioux Falls Housing and will be granted primarily for the following reasons: extenuating circumstances such as hospitalization or a family emergency for an extended period of time, a hard-to-house household, a household with 3 or more minor children, or a household that needs an accessible unit. The Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program allows you the opportunity to determine where you live. You can use your voucher to rent a unit within the city limits of Sioux Falls or Minnehaha County. You can use the voucher to rent a single-family house, an apartment, duplex, townhouse, or a mobile home, or to assist you with lot rent. You cannot use your voucher for a unit that is a public or Indian housing unit, a unit under a Section 8 project-based HAP contract, a nursing home, board or care home, or facility that provides continual psychiatric, medical, or nursing care, college or other school dormitories, or units on grounds of a penal, reformatory, medical, and mental similar public or private institutions. There are certain things you may want to think about when you're trying to decide where you want to live. Some of the things you might want to think about are the schools your children will attend. Is it within walking distance? Would the school bus your child? If not, how would I get my child to school? If your child needs Title I or other special programs, are they available at the school your child would attend? Is it a safe area? Would I feel safe living here? Do I need an apartment with a security system? Is it close to work or your daycare? If you don't have a vehicle, is the unit close to a bus line? There are advantages to moving into areas where there is not a high concentration of poverty. The only area in Sioux Falls that is a high poverty area is the downtown area. Federal regulations allow a voucher holder to transfer their rental assistance outside of Minnehaha County. This is called portability. A voucher may be ported to the jurisdiction of a housing authority in the United States or one of the U.S. territories, which are Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, that administers a Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher program. There are limitations on portability, which are: the voucher holder must have participated in the program for at least 12 months, or the voucher holder must have lived in Sioux Falls at the time he or she submitted an application card to the Sioux Falls Housing's waiting list. The voucher holder must be in compliance with the terms of the lease agreement with the landlord. They must have fulfilled the initial term of their lease agreement and given proper notice to vacate to their landlord and Sioux Falls Housing. The voucher holder must be in compliance with their family obligations, which we reviewed earlier in this presentation, and the voucher holder cannot owe Sioux Falls Housing any money. If you are interested in porting your voucher outside of Minnehaha County, please contact your Sioux Falls Housing caseworker to discuss it. The lease agreement that the voucher holder signs with the owner obligates it to pay their share of the rent. If the household does not pay their share of the rent, the owner may evict the household from the unit and the household would be terminated from the program. The owner cannot make the household pay more rent than Sioux Falls Housing says it should pay. The amount of rental assistance and the household share of the rent will change if there is a change in the household income or if the landlord raises the rent. Owners may charge voucher holders amounts over and above the amount set by Sioux Falls Housing for the following: services and appliances other than stove and refrigerator, detached garage and storage sheds not included in the lease agreement, excess utilities if the owner pays utilities such as air conditioning. The agreement for these charges must be in writing and approved by Sioux Falls Housing. Sioux Falls Housing uses a formula to determine the amount of rental assistance it will pay to the landlord on the household's behalf each month. The household must pay the difference between the rental assistance Sioux Falls Housing pays and the rent the landlord is asking for the unit. The more expensive a unit is, the more the household will pay out of pocket as their rental payment. The amount of rental assistance does not increase if the household rents a unit that exceeds Sioux Falls Housing's payment standards. Sioux Falls Housing calculates the maximum amount of rental assistance that will be paid on a household's behalf by subtracting 30% of the household's monthly adjusted income from Sioux Falls Housing's payment standard based on the household size and composition. Sioux Falls Housing's payment standards for the voucher program are 0 bedrooms or efficiencies, $534. 1 bedroom, $562. 2 bedroom, $718. 3 bedrooms, $938. 4 bedrooms, $1,038. 5 bedrooms, $1,193. The difference between these two examples is the amount the rent the landlord is charging for the unit. In example number 1, the rent the landlord is charging for the unit is lower than the payment standard. Therefore, the household's share of the rent is 30% of its income. Sioux Falls Housing pays the difference between that amount and the amount the landlord is charging for rent, $400. In example number 2, the rent the landlord is charging for the unit is higher than the payment standard. Sioux Falls Housing determines the maximum amount of rental assistance it can pay, which is the payment standard for the household size minus 30% of the monthly income, which is $465. Sioux Falls Housing pays the $465 for rental assistance. The household must pay the difference between the $750 contract rent and the $465 rental assistance, which is $285. The more expensive of a unit you rent, the more you will have to pay out of pocket as your share of the rent. A household's family composition and income directly affect the amount of rental assistance Sioux Falls Housing will pay on the household's behalf. If a household fails to report all household income, Sioux Falls Housing pays too much rental assistance. If a household doesn't report decreases in income, it will end up paying too much rent. Sioux Falls Housing approves the addition of persons to a household receiving rental assistance before the person moves in. The request to add a person must be made in writing. Sioux Falls Housing will have to verify the same information it verified for you for the proposed household member. Part of the approval process includes the household providing written permission from the landlord allowing the additional person to move into the unit. Any person moving into a rental assistance unit without Sioux Falls Housing's prior approval will be considered an unauthorized individual. If a household has an unauthorized individual living with them, the rental assistance could be terminated. A household receiving rental assistance may have a guest stay with them for 14 days without Sioux Falls Housing's approval. Any guest that stays in the unit for more than 14 days or a total of 30 days in a 12-month period will be considered living in the unit as an unauthorized individual. Sioux Falls Housing does not accept telephone calls reporting changes in income or the addition of household members. In order to report these changes, you must complete a tenant change report form. You will find a copy of this form in your briefing packet. Sioux Falls Housing can terminate a household from the rental assistance program for the following reasons. Number 1, if the household violates any of its family obligations under the program. We reviewed these obligations earlier in the briefing. You can review these obligations as they are listed on the voucher. Number 2, if a household moves during the first time of their lease agreement or moves more than once in a 12-month period. Number 3, if a member of the household has been evicted from public housing. Number 4, if there is a preponderance of evidence that a household member, guest, or other covered person is engaging in drug-related or criminal activity. Number 5. Has a household member who has been convicted of manufacturing or producing meth. Number 6. Has a household member who is a fugitive felon, parole violator, or person fleeing to avoid prosecution, custody, or confinement. Number 7. If tenant breaches an agreement with Sioux Falls Housing to pay amounts owed. Number 8. If household member has engaged in or threatened abusive or violent behavior towards Sioux Falls Housing staff. Number 9. If a household has 2 overpayments in rental assistance due to unreported income in a 2-year period. Number 10. If a household has an overpayment over $2,000 due to underreported income. Number 11. If 180 calendar days pass since the last rental assistance payments. Number 12. If the household is absent from the unit more than 30 days without Sioux Falls Housing's permission. This includes medical reasons, visiting relatives, or in jail. Number 13. Failing to cooperate with an inquiry into income discrepancy notification. HUD and the IRS compare databases of households receiving rental assistance. If the annual income a household reports to Sioux Falls Housing does not match with the amount of household income in the IRS computers, Sioux Falls Housing is required to contact that household to determine the reason for the discrepancy. A household receiving rental assistance will be given an opportunity for an informal hearing to consider whether decisions related to a household are in accordance with the law, HUD regulations, and Sioux Falls Housing policies. An informal hearing will be held prior to termination of the rental assistance. Issues that a household can request an informal hearing for include: Number 1. The calculation of the household's annual gross or adjusted income. Number 2. The calculation of the appropriate utility allowance, if any, for utilities the household has to pay. Number 3. A determination of the number of bedrooms a household qualified for under Sioux Falls Housing subsidy standards. Number 4. A determination to terminate rental assistance. If a household experiences a problem in locating a unit to rent based on race, color, creed, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, or disability, it may be because of illegal discrimination by the landlord. If you believe the landlord refuses to rent to you because of any of these factors, you may file a discrimination complaint with the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity of HUD. You will find a copy of the discrimination complaint form in your packet. We have also included a list of agencies you can contact for additional information on illegal discrimination. Sioux Falls Housing does not discriminate on the basis of disability in the admission or access to, or treatment or employment in its programs or activities. If the household needs a, Number 1, change in Sioux Falls Housing's policies or procedures. 2. Change in Sioux Falls Housing owner-managed apartment or other part of the property. 3. Change in the way Sioux Falls Housing communicates with you because of a disability, you can ask for a change. This request is called a reasonable accommodation. If your request is related to your disability, is reasonable, and not too expensive or difficult to arrange, Sioux Falls Housing will try and approve the change. Are there any questions about the information we've covered so far? If you have any questions after you leave today, please contact us. If you're aware of anyone receiving rental assistance through the Sioux Falls Housing who is violating program rules, please contact us. In January 2006, President Bush signed a law that states that housing authorities, such as Sioux Falls Housing, cannot consider a person's status as a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking to determine if a household is eligible for rental assistance. Sioux Falls Housing and an owner has the right to deny or terminate rental assistance to a person who engages in domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking. Sioux Falls Housing may terminate the assistance of a household that is a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking if they violate their family obligations, which we reviewed earlier during this briefing. There may be property owners that are willing to rent to a voucher holder, but Sioux Falls Housing cannot enter into a HAP contract with. These include, number 1, owner or manager that have been debarred, suspended, or subject to a limited denial of participation in accordance with federal regulations. Number 2, the federal government has institutioned an administrative or judicial action against the owner or manager for violation of the Fair Housing Act or other federal equal opportunity requirements, and the action is pending. Number 3, a court or administrative agency such as HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity has determined that the owner or manager has violated the Fair Housing Act or other federal equal opportunity requirements. Number 4, owner or manager that are currently engaging or have engaged in drug-related or violent criminal activity. Number 5, owner or manager that committed fraud, bribery, or other corrupt criminal act in connection with any federal housing program. Number 6, owner or managers that have verbally or physically threatened Sioux Falls Housing staff. Number 7, a property owner that is a parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, sister, brother, or any member of the household unless Sioux Falls Housing determines that approving the unit would provide a reasonable accommodation for a household member who is a qualified individual with disabilities. Number 8, if there is a conflict of interest under federal, state, or local law. Number 9, owner or managers that have violated any obligations under a Section 8 housing assistance payment contract. There are certain responsibilities landlords have if they're going to participate in the program. These responsibilities include, number 1, screening tenants. Sioux Falls Housing determines if a household meets HUD's eligibility criteria. It is up to the landlord to determine if your household is acceptable to him or her. Sioux Falls Housing is required to provide a prospective landlord with household's current address, landlord's name, and the phone number if known to Sioux Falls Housing, and past addresses, landlord names, and phone numbers if known to Sioux Falls Housing. Number 2, comply with fair housing law, which we've covered. Number 3, maintain the housing unit and making necessary repairs. The landlord can bill a household for tenants' caused damage. Number 4, comply with the terms of the HAP contract, which is a legal binding contract between the landlord and Sioux Falls Housing. This contract sets forth the terms and conditions of participating in the program. Number 5, collect security deposit, rent, and enforce the terms of the lease agreement. Number 6, provide Sioux Falls Housing with copy of the eviction or termination notices. Number 7, notify Sioux Falls Housing of any proposed changes to the lease. Sioux Falls Housing has responsibilities it must meet in order for the voucher program to work. These responsibilities include, number 1, certifying eligibility for the program and recertifying eligibility for continued participation in the program. Once a year, we are required to review your family composition, income, and assets and adjust the amount of rental assistance accordingly. Number 2, approve units and leases. This includes inspecting the unit before the rental assistance begins and at least once a year thereafter. Number 3, determine if the rent the owner is requesting is reasonable in comparison to comparable units available in the private market. Number 4, the purpose of the voucher program is to provide a low-income household the opportunity to rent safe, decent housing, not to increase a landlord's profit by paying higher rent. 5, issue checks to the landlords for the rental assistance portion of the rent. 6, process owner request increase in rent. 7, investigate fraud, criminal activity, and program non-compliance allegations. 8, monitor contract for owner compliance. 9, terminate households' participation for program violations, criminal activity, or upon request. Having a safe place to live is very important. The voucher program allows you to choose any house or apartment you like as long as it meets HUD's housing quality standards. Housing quality standards are very basic standards that every house or apartment must have. With rental assistance, you should be able to afford a good home, so you should think about what you'd like your home to have. You will find a booklet in your briefing called A Good Place to Live. You should read this booklet carefully. In each section, there is a picture and an explanation the items must have. Sioux Falls Housing cannot start the rental assistance until a unit has been inspected and determined it meets HUD's housing quality standards. In order to start receiving rental assistance, you need to take the following steps. Number 1, locate a unit. You decide which unit to rent. Remember, it must be located within the city of Sioux Falls or Minnehaha County. Here are some ideas where to start. Contact owners who have listed available units with Sioux Falls Housing. The listing is in your briefing packet. Ask friends or relatives if they know any units that are for rent. Drive around the neighborhoods you'd like to live and look for rent signs. Check the classified section of the Argus Leader. Check the shopping news. Contact real estate agents or rental locator services. Number 2, talk to the owner. Be prepared to make a good impression. Have rental references ready. Bring your briefing packet with you in case the landlord is not familiar with the voucher program. Number 3, evaluate the unit. Does the unit have the must-have listed in a good place to live? Remember, you have to stay in the unit for the entire term of the lease. Number 4, submit to Sioux Falls Housing the completed request for tenancy approval and the attached disclosure of information on lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards. You will find this form in your briefing packet. The first page is light green in color and has 2 white pages stapled to it. This is the document Sioux Falls Housing uses to determine if the rent burden test is met and triggers the inspection to determine if it meets HUD's housing quality standards. There is additional information included in your packet that you may want to review. I know this is a lot of information to absorb. Government programs aren't easy to administer, and they're certainly not easy to participate in. It's important that you keep all your documents like your lease agreement, any rent changes, or correspondence that Sioux Falls Housing sends you in one place. You may refer to these documents in the future, or you may need them for verification of your portion of rent and utilities you are responsible for paying for food stamps.